Ian, you said that climate science is the biggest cult in scientific history. And when I heard that, I was like, wow, that's a pretty bold statement. Why do you say that? Why do you stand behind that particular statement?
Because it's costing the planet trillions as a result of the climate science hysteria to completely change energy systems, which are constantly being revised and constantly made more efficient. And we've abandoned efficient, cheap, reliable energy and putting in unreliable energy. We're completely recapitalising grids. We're completely recapitalising generation of electricity. There isn't enough electricity. We have to have backup, which is enormously expensive, which lasts for a very short period of time. The costs are absolutely horrendous. Now, scientists will publish work, but if there's an economic consequence from that work, they bear no responsibility. They will get on and publish the next paper, and then they publish the next paper. So it's absolutely crippling Western countries who are going down this path, because you cannot run an industrial economy on sea breezes and sunbeams. There's just not enough grunt.
So what we're effectively talking about is net zero. And what do you think about the UK's approach to net zero?
Well, I think you should tell your Prime Minister that you breathe in 0.04% carbon dioxide, and because he's metabolising food, he breathes out 4% carbon dioxide. So if he wants to go to net zero, drop dead. That's the solution. It's totally ridiculous. Our bodies are carbon-based. Carbon dioxide is a major planetary gas. It's been around for billions of years. The first atmosphere had methane and hydrogen and helium and some carbon dioxide in it. The second atmosphere, which was dominant for a very long period of time, was rich in carbon dioxide. And it had hundreds of times more carbon dioxide than now. And what do we see? A thriving of life. And the third atmosphere is an oxygen-bearing atmosphere, which we currently live in. So we've had an evolution of the atmosphere. We've demonised something which you can't see, you can't taste it, you can't smell it, and so you can demonise it. The same as you can demonise viruses or bacteria or radiation. It's a wonderful, wonderful thing to scare people with. We don't get told that carbon dioxide is plant food, and without carbon dioxide, you have no life on Earth.
And what's the rationale for doing this? Because look, on the net zero side of it, there are some people who still haven't caught up, but I regard what you're saying about net zero as completely uncontroversial. I think it's exceedingly clear at this point that net zero is economic suicide. And I think that's what we're seeing in our country, in other countries. And I don't think that's controversial. I don't think that's questionable. I think that's just a matter of fact for anyone who's looked at it with an open mind and with anything like a rational approach. But on the science aspect, this is where I really wanted to explore the things that you're saying, because I think it's incredibly valuable. Why do you think the scientific community, or at least this is what we've been told, the scientific community has arrived at a point where we keep being told, the vast majority of scientists agree that human activity is causing climate change, and it will cause it to get to a point where it's runaway climate change, which means we basically can't go back and the planet just overheats, quote unquote. How did we get to that being the consensus view, and is it the consensus view?
Well, you never have consensus in science. Once you've got consensus, it isn't science. The second thing is we've had times in the past when the carbon dioxide content of the atmosphere was at least 10% and perhaps 20% compared with 0.04%. And what did we have then? We had the biggest ice ages this planet's ever enjoyed. And this is when we had kilometres of ice at the equator at sea level. And the evidence for this is incontrovertible. It's worldwide. And this is written in the rocks. We geologists see this and we understand it.
I just want to flesh that out, just sorry to interrupt. So what you're saying is there have been times in the history of this planet when there's been hundreds of times more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere than there is today.
Yes.
And that at those points, it was incredibly cold.
Yes.
On average.
Yes. And then it warmed up quickly in the interglacials and then it cooled down again. That's not driven by carbon dioxide. That's driven by something else, like that great ball of heat in the sky we call the sun. Mm. It's driven by the Earth's orbit. It's driven by many, many other factors. It's driven by where the continents might be. So we've had very high carbon dioxides in the atmosphere before. And what has happened is we've sequestered that into carbonate rocks. And this has been happening for a long period of time. Now, with those older glaciations, the carbonate rock was dolomite, which has got 48% of the gas carbon dioxide in it. That's by weight. And so we pulled that carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. And in younger times, in the last 20% of time, we've pulled carbon dioxide out of the limestone. We've pulled it into carbon-rich sediments, black shales, into coals, into the shells, into the which are now fossils, into carbon-rich rocks. So that's been sequestered out of the atmosphere, and that process has been going on for at least 1 billion years, but we certainly have got very good evidence that about 500 million years ago, when we had an explosion of life, we had 0.7% carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. It's gone down to 0.04%. Where's it gone? It's gone into the rocks, into sediments. Now, during that 500 million years, we've had 3 major ice ages, yet carbon dioxide has been going down over time.
Yeah.
So there's no relationship between temperature and carbon dioxide.
So why do so many people in the scientific world, in government, in politics, why do so many people believe that there is this strong connection?
Well, you used the word believe, and that's a word of religion and politics. It's not a word of science. And they believe it because that's the way of putting bread on the table. Now, I've had these people in various departments that I've run, and these people are mainly mathematical modelers. They're eminently unemployable. They are able to get grants from governments by scaring people witless, and the government throws them a few shekels to keep them alive. And they base their life on a model, looking at what might happen in the future, and if something goes wrong, they'll redo the model. Now, we've had 40 years of models now, and of the 102 major models we have, not one of them has told us what we've measured over the last 40 years. So they don't work because they make one assumption which is invalid, and that is that carbon dioxide drives temperature. Now, there's not one scientific paper out there, and this is a big call, but you can check it out. There's not one scientific paper there that demonstrates that human emissions drive global warming. If there were, you'd never hear the end of it. Now, this is a question I always ask people who call themselves climate scientists, and I question that. I say, show me. Show me the evidence, because that's what you do in science. Show me the evidence. Show me that the human emissions drive global warming. And if you can show me, then you've got to show me that the other emissions, which are natural, which are 97% of the emissions, don't drive global warming. It's never been done. So the whole thing is a fallacy right from the start. It's keeping a lot of people employed in universities and in institutions and in government. It's driven by bureaucrats who are green. We've had a 40-year dumbing down or 50-year dumbing down of our education system, and these people now give us the benefit of their knowledge as bureaucrats and as politicians.
Don't you find it remarkable that so many people have bought into this, including very, very intelligent people? We interviewed Boris Johnson. Boris Johnson really believes in what you've been saying and how, this global warming has been influenced and driven by man-made causes.
You've used that word believe again, and belief is a religious phenomenon. And I think this is a new religion. We have, in the West, almost completely abandoned Christianity. But we have to have faith in something, and this is the new religion. And so an intelligent person like Boris Johnson might understand the classics, but he needs to go back a few more thousand years. Wow. But even if he did read the classics, he would know that in the time of Jesus, it was warmer than now. Then in the Viking times, it was cooler than now. Then in the medieval times, it was warmer than now. And then in the Middle Ages, we had the Little Ice Age. It was considerably colder than now, and we've warmed up since the Little Ice Age. Well, what a surprise. So I think this is the new religion, and this has turned out to be blind, unreasoning faith.
Because there was at one point, I think it was in the 1970s, where the great, how shall we say, the great worry was global cooling.
Yes, of course. Science operates on frightening people if you want a research grant. So I once served on the Australian Research Council. I also served on the German Research Council and the Swedish Research Council. But in Australia, we were instructed by the minister to give money, grant monies to people who were fighting the war on cancer. And if you could demonstrate that there was a relationship between ingrown toenails and cancer, you would get funded. Now you will get funded if you can put climate change into your research grant application. So it is the new religion. It's been embraced with fervour, and it's going to cost us very, very dearly.
And the thing that I always found weird, because look, I'm not a scientist, I follow this stuff, but nowhere in the detail that obviously you do as a scientist or other people. But one of the things that I found strange was embracing of Greta Thunberg. And she was seen as the front person for this particular movement. And I was, at the time, she was 15 years old. And at that time, I was a school teacher. And I was thinking to myself, why are we letting a school kid be the forefront of a global movement? It's weird.
Well, she wasn't a school kid. She didn't go to school. And this, again, we see in religion, in Christianity, young women often appear as something on the horizon. We don't question it. We just admire it and view it from distance. She couldn't answer a single question you put to her. She's absolutely pig ignorant because she didn't go to school. And our education system now has dumbed down people where they've lost the ability to think critically. We don't ask questions. And if you ask questions, you get banned, you get thrown out. So I think this is a perfect scam to run with an ill-educated society that's given up the basis of Western civilization, and that's Christianity.
And it's also believing as well that it's very anti-human. That's the thing. The other thing about it, I remember talking to a neighbour of mine, and he's an old boy, and he's got a few kids.
Careful.
He wasn't in his prime like you are, Ian. And he was talking about one of his sons, and he said that he didn't want to have children. I was like, oh, okay, is it a lifestyle choice? And he just went, no, he's really worried about the climate, and so they don't want to bring children into a world where they feel that the world is going to end. And I just thought that's unbelievably tragic.
Well, think of previous generations. If you were in 1916 living in this country, you would ask the same question, should I have children? If you're 1942 in this country, you would ask the same question. I can remember as a young man, we were worried about having children because of the impending nuclear holocaust that we're going to have. Mm-hmm. So I think every generation goes through this and every generation survives it. And I think people are a little bit too sensitive and they're not really thinking. Other generations have had this in the past. Can you think of being in Ireland in 1844 with the potato famine? People had children. So I think it's an irrational way of thinking.
Well, let's come back to the science a little bit. Can you give us, I think one of the interesting things whenever we talk to someone like you is you operate on a time scale that the overwhelming majority of people have no way of even conceptualizing in their head, which is millions of years, hundreds of millions of years. And do you think that's part of the reason we're here? In the sense that I often think, like, if people saw the entire history of global temperatures and saw where we are on it, they would ask a lot more questions than anyone's been asking. But if you only look at the last 50 years, then a story can be told that's much more persuasive about how it's all doom and gloom.
Well, I think that's exactly right. People don't understand the past. They don't want to know about the past. They don't learn about the past, so they can't ask the right questions. And that's why we geologists are never regarded seriously when it comes to climate change, because the same processes that operated 100 years ago or 1 billion years ago, they're still here. You have to change the laws of physics and chemistry. If you're going to say, well, the geology's wrong, it doesn't work. So when we look in the past, we look at the 6 great ice ages, we look at the 5 great extinctions of complex life, but we also integrate that with history. We integrate it with what has been lived. So I used the example before, when someone might say, oh, it's the hottest time we've had ever. You say, well, no, we've cooled down since the time of Jesus. It was much hotter then. It was much hotter in the medieval times. It was much hotter in the 1930s. So how far do you want to go back? You don't have to go back very far to show that we're not living in unusual times. We are actually living in an ice age because we've got polar ice. Ice is a rare rock. For less than 20% of time, we've had ice on Earth. So we're living in an unusual time, but when you look at the temperature over time, and you don't need to go back very far, the temperature doesn't change very much at all in our lifetime compared with the past. So we had a period after the last glaciation, which ended 14,400 years ago, where the ice sheets broke up and dropped huge amounts of ice into the Atlantic Ocean. We suddenly became cool, and this is a period called the Younger Dryas. And we had temperature drops that were very, very large, like 10 and 15 degrees Celsius drops. And it took about 10 years to have a 15 degrees Celsius rise after the Younger Dryas. Now, that's global warming. What happened in the Younger Dryas? We actually huddled into villages. We fortified those villages. We invented animal husbandry. We invented, for survival, we invented agriculture, where we collected grass seeds and actually grew them. We've got extremely good evidence of that. So in these times of hardship, we humans thrived. And once it became warm, and history shows us this, then we get the populations expanding. We have less war. The economy thrives. For example, in the medieval warming, Europe had 2 harvests a year. That gave an enormous amount of wealth. That wealth was spent on the universities, the cathedrals, the monasteries. We see evidence. You've only got to travel through Europe and see this. So over time, we can see that temperature has changed a lot. Now, we also have cycles of climate. The geological cycles are every 400 million years, and that's when we pull apart or stitch back together the continents. And it's the position of the continents that really does drive your climate.
Really? Can you explain the mechanics of that?
Well, it's plate tectonics. It's pulling apart, and you have fractures going deep into the earth. These fractures leak out molten rock, which has to cool down, and they leak out carbon dioxide. We've got that process happening right now in the mid-ocean ridges. We have about 70,000 kilometres of mid-ocean ridges. We're leaking out carbon dioxide out of the basalts there. We have about 3.4 million old volcanoes on the ocean floor that we've been able to measure. We know that there's a volcanologist will give us a very strong correlation between a swarm of earthquakes, which means molten rock is rising, and degassing and putting carbon dioxide into seawater. It doesn't bubble up because it dissolves. And when that carbon dioxide as a basalt lava or volcano erupts on the sea floor, then you have to cool it down. You cool it down with seawater. And 1 cubic kilometre of molten basalt is at 1,200 degrees Celsius. If you cool that, that's enough energy for 30 hurricanes. So there's this thought in the volcanological area that maybe El Niños are related to the movement of molten rock beneath the oceans, and that's got to be cooled down, and that gives you warm water above. So we've got this 400 million year cycle. It's currently in process, and we can see it happening right now in Antarctica. The ice sheets in West Antarctica have 150 geothermal areas and volcanoes underneath the ice. That's because we're pulling apart Antarctica. Once we pulled it apart, we'll completely change the ocean currents. Antarctica is currently isolated. Warm tropical water can't get to it. We have a circumpolar current, and it freezes. Once we break up Antarctica, currents will be able to move, and we will go back to the normal situation that planet Earth has been in, where it's been warmer and it's been wetter and sea level's been about 200 metres higher. We've got extremely good evidence of that time and time again over the past. So these 400 million year cycles, it's not quite 400 million years, it varies a little bit, but these are tectonic cycles. We've got galactic cycles where every 143 million years we've got a bad address in the galaxy and we get cold. We've got orbital cycles, these Milankovitch cycles, which get spoken about a lot, and that their cycles on about 100,000 years, 40,000 years and 20,000 years, and that changes the distance we are from the sun. And then we've got solar cycles, and there we've got some long ones around 10,000 years, and we've just come out of a grand solar maximum. We've got cycles about 217 years, 1,500 years, and the 22-year cycle, which has been known for hundreds of years. We've got lunar tidal cycles where we push warm water up into the Arctic. That's from the moon, and that's every 18.6 years. And so that combined with the ocean cycles, which are every 600 years, every 60 years, you can then plot the exploration of the North-West Passage, and it's every 60 years. You can see that it's warmer and people can get through. They got through in wooden boats. So we've got these oceanic cycles, and just recently there's been a cycle which I want to see more evidence, but there's a suggestion there might be a Martian cycle every 2.4 million years. So we've got solar cycles, orbital cycles, galactic cycles, tectonic cycles, and all of that is being reduced to saying traces of a trace gas in the atmosphere drive a major planetary system. Pull the other one, it's got bells on it.
If you're still with us, you're going to love what's next. It's right there. Go on, give it a click.